Welcome to Sheehy Sports Talk. In today's session, we'll be talking about racing sports, steroids, concussions, and cheating in sports. Here's your host, Cam Hall.
So the first question is, what is your take on steroids in sports?
Well, Mikey, what is your take on steroids in sports?
So I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, it's just bringing the fun to the game. I mean, because without all these home runs and everything, especially in baseball, I don't think people wouldn't be enjoyable. And I think it's actually saving baseball because without steroids in sports and using it in baseball especially, that no one would even come to it.
I agree with you there. If without steroids, there would be less home runs, and home runs is what everyone likes in baseball. And without steroids in football, there'd be less big hits and less huge collisions, which everyone likes. So I think steroids are actually helping sports right now.
All right, so if you took out steroids in sports, would certain sports still be enjoyable?
I don't think so, because if you look at it, football, I mean, yeah, it'd still have some big hits, but I think steroids actually help out. And baseball, you definitely not be as enjoyable because there's be less home runs, not making so good plays. And in basketball, you don't really see as much steroids in basketball, but it'd be more dunks and everything. But
Yeah, and even if you look into less big sports, you have like the Olympics where people are posting higher scores, faster times because they're taking steroids and becoming stronger and faster. So, I mean, it's good for the people to watch and have fun. I mean, I think people would still like sports, but this definitely adds some flavor to it.
and if everyone's using it, no one really has an advantage. So I don't think it really matters if everyone uses it.
So racism in sports is getting better, but it's still in all sports. Will racing sports ever go away for good?
No, it will never go away because you always have. I mean, we grow up in a society where it's just not going to change. You can see it's dying down, but it's still going to be there. Soccer is still really bad with racism. There's probably racism problems every day because there's so many more leagues and so many more races, because there's a league in every country and everything. So you're going to have it more. But in football, they're trying to die it down with not using the N-word and stuff like that. In basketball, I mean, it's still there, but I mean, it's slowly dying down, but it'll never go away.
Yeah, I agree with him. It's racism in sports is one of those things where if you try and stop it, you're just never going to succeed. The people, I mean, in today's society, people just do whatever you can to get an edge on the opponent, and trash talking or making them feel uncomfortable is just part of it, and that's just it.
And also, if you look at the logos and everything, how people take that as being racist, they're going to take anything as being racist if they can look at any small details of it. So, I mean, it's kind of the way people perceive that as racist, but it's never really going to die down.
So what do you think about penalizing people for using racial slurs in sports?
I think it's a good strive for the leagues to make. I mean, it's a good idea, but I just don't think it would ever happen. There would be way too many calls, way too many, and I just think it's wrong that you're telling someone who maybe is part of that racial slur group and telling them not to use that word. I think that's wrong.
It depends on the sport, really, because, I mean, if you look at football, you're not really going to stop it because with all the helmets and, I mean, all the people all around, you're never really going to know who really said it. Basketball, you could probably see it because there's less people on the court and you can actually see who's talking and whatnot, but in most of the other sports, but, I mean, it's not really going to help it. It's just putting a bad image on the leagues because it makes them look like they're not a racist league and that their league's so bad.
All right, so to move on to concussions in sports. So is the NFL to blame for former players with brain damage?
Not at all, because most of the people in the NFL don't play more than a few years, maybe 4, depending on how good you really are. But, I mean, they played for 15, 16, 17 years plus before they even got to NFL, or maybe even less, but you're still going through high school, which is 4 years, college 4 years, and all the youth before that when your brain isn't really developed and it's still growing. So I mean, I think it's more of the beginning of it than actually the end. I think they're just taking the hit for it.
Yeah, I agree. The NFL is only part of that player's football career, and they're actually the ones paying the players millions of dollars to play for them. And so I think it's wrong to blame the NFL when they've been playing football their whole lives, hitting their heads their whole lives, and the NFL is the ones paying them millions of dollars and making them have a living off of their sport.
Okay, will the love of football ever die down due to head injuries?
I think the love for football will never die down in America, especially because it's similar to like boxing or MMA or any of that. People will know the risks now. They know that they can hurt themselves, but that's not going to stop anybody from playing it. People are still going to play it. People are still going to like the big hits, and people are still going to try and hit people as hard as they can, and that's just that simple.
I disagree because, I mean, especially now in younger sports, and especially in football, but they're starting to like move away from. They're probably starting to play flag football now, earlier in the ages, and then instead of actually using full contact. And I think that parents are getting more worried because they're actually developing more things to show like how damaging it actually is to a youth's brain. And I think since they're taking away like the actual football, they're going to get interested in something else and possibly play something else and not end up actually playing football.
I think that the only thing that they could do is if technology keeps on developing and they can get a safe helmet that prevents concussions for real, and then that might prevent people from leaving football. And I also think if you look at sports in Europe like rugby, they don't have anywhere near the protection. They get the same hits, and people still play. People still love it. I don't think it's going anywhere.
But you're never really going to get a helmet that has a full protection because, I mean, it's just the brain hitting the back of the brain and hitting the back of the skull and going forward. I mean, you're never really going to fix it. So, I mean, and in those sports, just because it's more predominant in the NFL because people stand up and they've done research in Europe, they don't really look at it. It's kind of, what's called, overlooked, per se.
All right, so to move on to like betting in sports, if you could legally bet on sports, would that increase interest?
I mean, it's a good point. I think that if you are allowed to bet in sports and you're, then maybe some people would like to watch it. Like if you look at March Madness, people love filling out those brackets, love having the chance to win $1 billion if they get the right bracket, and they'll start to watch those NCAA games this upcoming March. And I think that if you did that in all sports, maybe you'd get more fans.
I think gambling in sports is necessary because to draw another attraction to the ballparks, the people watching the games, they actually get more interested. They actually have something more to watch because if you look at baseball, I mean, sometimes games can last for like 3 hours or plus. I mean, who really wants to sit there? I mean, if you don't really love baseball, but if you had people betting on that game, more people would actually watch it and be more interested. And yeah, it may bring in more controversy about people throwing games, but as long as you didn't add the players in, I think it would still be a good idea because it's bringing more attraction to the people, and it could also make the organizations more money and whatnot.
All right, so my final question is, should players be allowed to bet if they're betting on a different sport?
I mean, yeah, the problem presents itself where if people are allowed to bet on sports, then the players need to bet on sports, and I mean they should be able to, but then people will be throwing games and to make themselves even a little bit more money than they're already making, which is outrageous. But I think that people could bet if you play baseball and you want to bet on a football game, that'll be better. But also opening up betting in sports, it will be hard to keep the players out of it.
I disagree because I feel if you have people start betting on games that they're going to end up bringing the controversy of throwing games or poor shaving because if you look at baseball, they probably might have a friend in a football team that could be throwing the game for them. And if you're not going to be able to if you're going to have someone throwing games, it's just, then it's just going to bring that controversy in, and I just don't think it's going to be helpful to them. To the baseball or any sport in general, just because especially with baseball's background of already having people throwing games, that it's really not going to help at all.
Well, that's all she wrote for today, folks. So see you next week on next week's edition of Sheehy Sports Talk.